Good afternoon, everyone. This is Greg Core from OSEP's Monitoring and State Improvement Planning Division, and I'm speaking to you from a very hazy, smoky Washington, D.C. We're experiencing hazardous air quality issues due to the Canadian wildfires, so it's a good day to stay indoors. I got a call about halfway through the day that my son's school was closing, and I had to go get him, and they will be back to virtual again tomorrow, like we were doing during COVID. So hopefully this will clear up in a few days. As Shoshana said, this is the first of 2 TA calls we're having in June. As I'm sure you're aware, if you're on this call, OSEP will be issuing its 2023 Section 616 determinations in a few weeks. Each year prior to issuing the determinations, we have calls to prepare you for the SPP APR responses you'll be receiving, so you can interpret that, the accompanying letter, the matrix, and other items that will come with that. Leading us through this part of the call will be Associate Division Director Christine Pilgrim, who I think you all know, as well as our newest staff member, who you might not know, Sharon Loza. Sharon was recently hired as our Data Implementation Team Facilitator. We are very pleased about having Sharon joining our staff and look forward to her leadership. In addition, today, you will be hearing from Angela Rossler, a representative of our contractor, AEM Corporation. Angela will describe EMAP's enhancements both for this year as well as plans for future years. So I'm going to turn the call over first to Angela.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Greg. So next slide. I think we can skip through a few of these. Next slide. And one more. All right, perfect. Thank you. So as Greg mentioned, today I'm going to be sharing an overview of some enhancements that are being made in the APR tool that we're really excited about. I'm going to talk about the timeline associated with those changes and some new changes that will be implemented in the system next year. Next slide. All right, so the purpose. So we have enhanced the system user interface as well as the docx outputs to display a read-only section called determination enclosures. So really the purpose of this change is to support, as you can see here on the slide, section 504 and 508, and working towards improving users' accessibility to the data and eliminating the need to provide these data in attachment format. Next slide. So this is a new section that's going to have 4 subsections within it that will display data related to the determinations, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with. So we've got the RDA matrix, and the data rubric sections are going to display the data that MSIP obviously provides to inform the final determinations. And then there is going to be a dispute resolution and how department made determination subsections. I did mention that these are view only, but just want to be clear that these new sections will require no action from states. Next slide. Kind of tiny, but how to find these new sections. So here is actually a screenshot of what the data rubric subsection is going to look like. But similar to how you access the indicators within the APR tool, you'll have the same 2 options to navigate to these sections. So first, as you can see here at the top, it's the quick access bar that you guys may be familiar with or recall displaying on the top panel after logging into the system. And then next slide. Again, it's kind of tiny here. Hopefully you guys can see this and are familiar with this format, but down here at the very bottom, you'll see the determination enclosures section, and each subsection will also display on the left-hand navigation tree to allow you guys to view the data. And as you can see here, hopefully it will be displaying at the very bottom of that navigation panel after the certification section at the bottom. And you can also see here kind of a sneak peek at what the RDA matrix subsection will look like as well. Next slide. So the dispute resolution subsection, I'm going to It's going to remain blank in the system this year, as well as blank in the DocX. I'm going to talk about this here in a second when we review next year's enhancements, but the attachment to provide the EMAP survey data is still going to be added manually to each state DocX output after the close and made publicly available in late 2023 on OSEP's IDEA website, as it has in the past. So we'll circle back to this one, but next slide. And then finally, as I noted, there's going to be a how department made determination subsection. So similar to the other subsections, user interface and the doc outputs are going to display this direct link for users to be able to copy and paste into their browser to access the current year's how department made determinations document on obviously OSEP's IDE website. The current year document, just wanted to kind of call this out here because we made a little bit of a change to how we're structuring where this document is going to be located. But the current year document will be posted each year at this link in the June timeframe, but then we're going to archive it in the December timeframe when we open for that next year's collection. Really, the purpose of that is just to ensure that this link that we're providing to you directs you to the correct current year version each year. And when I say archive, I don't mean remove. You guys will still be able to access prior year how department made determinations on the OSEP IDEA site as well. Next slide. So timeline. This is going to actually be viewable within the system in a little over a week. So on Monday, June 19th, you will see these new sections after logging into the system. But again, just to note for this year, these sections will remain blank until after the determinations are released in late June. After determinations are released, the data rubric and results matrix subsections will be populated with the data, and then you'll be able to view that in the generated DocX as well. Next slide. So future year enhancements. We did want to give everyone a sneak peek to a few additional enhancements that we're going to be working on here soon and will be available in late 2024. So as I mentioned, first is, as I mentioned previously, the first is the dispute resolution survey. So we are going to be enhancing the system as well as the DocXs to display the EMAP's dispute resolution survey data in the same read-only format that you briefly saw for the data rubric and the results matrix. And the final determination letters. So we're really excited about this one, but we'll be working to display those letters directly within the system. So, everyone has easy accessibility to it within the system and be able to view the content of that within the actual DocX outputs. Obviously, both of them eliminating the need for those attachments to be loaded into the system. And one additional note that I just wanted to call out to kind of when you're going to see the data in the system. So you'll see the data similar to when these attachments have been provided to states in the past. So starting next year, actually not next year, in December, when we open for FFY 2022, everything will be blank, right? Then at clarification open, you'll be able to view the data rubrics data since that's always been made available to you at that time. And the system and the DocX outputs will display blank cells for the results matrix at that time. It's only after, similar to this year, here in a few weeks, after Ed has issued determinations, you'll be able to view both the results matrix and the data rubric data within the system and your outputs. Next slide. And finally, just wanted to provide contact information for our amazing partner support center, which I hope everyone has handy and has spoken to at some point. We will be sending out a broadcast next Wednesday, I believe, to notify everyone of these changes. At that time, you'll be able to view an updated user guide as well as the updated state templates, which will be posted to the SPP APR community site. And then both will be available within the system on that help tab after logging into the system on the 19th. And next slide, I think that's it. Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully everyone's excited as we are. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A panel, and I'll be happy to respond. And as Greg mentioned, I'm going to hand things over to Christine Pilgrim and Sharon Loza to cover the remaining content for today's call. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. So we're going to continue our discussion now to talk about what we're going to expect with our determinations this year. Next slide. So in preparation for determinations being finalized, OSEP has been conducting a series of rigorous quality control checks. With this, determinations will be issued on June 21st for Part C and June 23rd for Part B. Those dates are noted in EMAPs on the timeline. As was the case last year, MSIP Director Greg Core will send an email to chief state school officers and lead agency directors indicating the system's open to view determination letters and OSEP's response to your submission. Also, PSC will send out an email blast to all users letting them know the system's open. Next slide. In the EMAPS SPP APR tool, states will be able to review the final OSEP responses and required actions as applicable for each indicator. Similar to last year, the actions that the state is required to take are located under the required actions section of each indicator. It'll be important for you to review the introduction to the SPP APR. Also, all states can find the following attachments. You'll find the state's determination letter, a PDF entitled Dispute Resolution 2021-22, which includes the IDEA Section 618 data that OSEP used to calculate the state's timely state complaint decisions and timely due process hearing decision scores in the compliance matrix. As AM discussed earlier, you'll also be able to access the following items within the user interface. You'll be able to find the RDA matrix that is individualized for each state and includes the state's determination, the state's RDA percentage that is based on both the compliance score and the results score. For Part B and Part C states, this percentage is 50% results and 50% compliance. For entities, the RDA percentage is 60% compliance and 40% results. Scoring on compliance indicators and other compliance factors, and scoring on results indicators and other results factors. Also in the user interface, you'll be able to access the data rubric that shows how OSEP calculated the state's timely and accurate state reported data score in the compliance matrix, and also the How the Department Made Determinations document that provides a detailed description of how OSEP evaluated and scored the state's data. Next slide. All right, great. As was the case last year, the department will not post ICC forms. We will acknowledge the receipt of the ICC form in the OSEP response under the introduction. 2 years ago, we took into consideration the challenges programs had experienced trying to make ICC forms compliant after adding a signature, and also to ensure that all programs had the same information posted on the IDEA website. We want to extend a special thank you for submitting the revised ICC forms with the updated dates this year. We acknowledge the confusion that caused and appreciate your follow-up. For any states with outstanding issues, there will be an OSEP response. Next slide. In the coming weeks, states' final documents will be posted on sites.ed.gov, and these include the final DocX with all 508 accessible attachments embedded, and the state's determination letter and related OSEP attachments. Please note that state entities are responsible for posting the final APR, inclusive of OSEP responses and required actions, in addition to all attachments, including any that were not 508 compliant in accordance with the federal timeline. We will notify you when the documents are live. You should expect to hear from your OSEP state lead about scheduling a follow-up call to discuss determinations and answer any questions you may have related to OSEP's analyses. So from here, I'm going to hand it off to Christine to continue to discuss determinations. Next slide.
Thank you, Sharon. I don't think anyone's happier than I am that Sharon is here. So thrilled that she's going to be a part of OSEP and moving forward a part of all of our data work. So I'm going to talk about sampling plans and, determinations 2023, and then what to expect moving forward. So you know that last year we had lots of discussions about sampling plans. Any of you that were using sampling and indicators that permitted sampling, we asked you to submit those to us, and want to say a big thank you to those that submitted initial or revised sampling plans. Please provide a prompt response to any feedback you received from OSEP regarding your plans. If you have any questions about the feedback you've received from OSEP, it is very helpful to us if you provide those questions in writing to your state lead so that we can be very efficient in our response and supporting you moving forward. If you have yet to receive feedback on a plan that you've submitted, please know that OSEP is currently working on these reviews and we'll provide feedback via your state lead as soon as possible. Likewise, please make sure that you keep your state lead abreast of any developments or changes or issues related to your plans and the timing of submitting those to us. And as always, if you need assistance with your sampling plans, please reach out to IDC and Daisy. They are well poised to support you in this space. So please make sure that you're utilizing them as a resource if you have questions as well. Next slide, please. I wanted to take a quick moment to touch on EdFact's modernization. I don't have anything to tell you like dates for anything or any information that you're probably waiting for with bated breath, but I just want to flag a few things for you because it is a shift and I want to make sure that everyone has it top of mind. So under EdFact's modernization, states are expected to submit high quality data. We're talking about the 618 data collections that can be published and used by the department as of the due date. So obviously that is a departure from how you submitted 618 collections in the past, where there was might have been some back and forth with our research to practice colleagues and a resubmission period, et cetera. Now there's one due date, there is no resubmission period, and the expectation is that when you submit on that due date, that your data are high quality and they can be used. So states are going to be expected to conduct data quality reviews prior to the due date. And OSEP's expectation is that states are going to take one of two actions for any business rules that are triggered in the EdPass or EMAP systems prior to the due date. And that those expectations are that you're going to revise the uploaded data to address the edit that was triggered by the business rules, or provide a data note addressing why the data submission triggered the business rule. The most important thing I want you to remember that data submitted as of the due date, those are the data that we use in the SPP APR and that are used for making the determination. So those are going to be the data that are in your RDA matrices. We've had a number of touch points across the agency with folks, with data managers, et cetera, in states around EdFact's modernization. Expect to hear more. Check your emails frequently to stay abreast of the latest developments, but really wanted to make sure that this is top of mind for folks moving forward. Next slide, please. So you'd remember in last year's determination letter, we signaled that we were considering changes to how we would make determinations in 2023 and beyond. We had opportunities for you to provide input, either via email submissions because we had a mailbox set up, or some of the meetings that we were all in attendance at. And you shared incredible feedback with us during that time. And based on that input, we've had robust discussions internally about things we can do to change determinations for 2023 with this sort of focus and lens on prioritizing equity and improving outcomes for infants, toddlers, and children with disabilities, but then also thinking about what we could be doing in 2024 and beyond. So for 2023, there are few changes, not many, and not some of the big ticket ones that you guys might have been hoping for this year and certainly flagged for us in your input, but there is still in heavy discussion in OSEP. So because it doesn't happen this year, doesn't mean that we are not considering or it might not happen at all. Two of the changes are cross-cutting in nature and one is specific to Part B. I'm only going to talk about them at an extremely high level. I'm not going to get into the weeds because this is going to be discussed in the how the department made determinations, et cetera. And we're still a little ways out from final determinations anyway. So just at a very, very high level. If you can envision the how the department made determinations document, if you've seen it a number of times, or the compliance matrix, you know that we have an element for long-standing non-compliance that includes scoring on two elements. One of them is tied to if a state has specific conditions, and the other one around uncorrected non-compliance for a certain number of years. Historically, we have sort of, it's been a combined element and we've scored them in a particular way. And this year we're going to tweak how those are scored. So specifically around the specific conditions portion of that element, we're going to tweak that slightly, as well as how we look at uncorrected noncompliance for a certain amount of time. And then specific to Part B, and indicator 4B specifically, we spent a considerable amount of time this year focused on ensuring that state's methodology for identifying significant discrepancies are aligned with OSEP's requirements. You know that when we had our national TA call it clarification, and for many of you, you got OSEP response that you may not have seen before. We talked about it a little bit at clarification in the clarification call, but also I know that during clarification, you had conversations with your state leads and others in our office who are steeped in these data to talk through your methodology and information that we really needed to see and needed to understand to have a full picture of what you were doing. We've also begun our process for determining whether a state's methodology is reasonable, which was flagged in the discipline guidance last year. Specifically, I think it's question L6 in that, and we also flagged it in the SPP APR instructions. And I'd like to say that overall, we appreciate all of your efforts to ensure that OSEP has all of the information it needs to truly understand your methodology and what you're doing in your state. So for this year, we will not consider 4B as a factor in making determinations, but I want to reinforce that suspending using 4B as a factor this year isn't something that I'm saying is going to be in perpetuity moving forward. We want to be very clear because we still have, you know, that laser focus and that lens on prioritizing equity. That's just a change for this year that we're going to suspend using 4B as a factor on the compliance matrix. Next slide, please. I will also say that as I mentioned, this will be discussed in the determination letters and how the department made determinations. But once again, very, very high level, because I know that y'all were sitting with bated breath, wondering what was going to happen this year. But know that the conversations have not ended for what's possible in 2024 and moving forward. So what to expect next? For those of you that have been around a while, it'll look familiar to you. For those of you that are new, happy to lay out the cadence of our engagement moving forward and what your expectations should be. So between the summer months and through next January, your state leads are going to be reaching out to you. Well, as soon as we issue determinations, state leads are going to reach out to you to schedule a determinations call. And that's an opportunity to get clarification on your analysis. But you should be looking at your engagement with us from July all the way through the end of January of 2024 and leading into the next submission. A determinations call or any engagement with your state lead is not like a one and done. And we don't want you to have that perspective about connecting with us. We hope that we have continued engagement with you regarding the status of work in your state, including the implementation of your OSEP, your state strengths, any challenges you're experiencing or opportunities that you see on the horizon to deepen your work, and opportunities for technical assistance from us, as well as your OSEP funded TA providers. There are also some areas where we think there's a need for some additional clarification or technical assistance from OSEP. And we do look forward to connecting with our TA providers around those areas soon, so that we can think about how we can work with them to make sure that you have all the support you need. Obviously, B4 is one of those spaces, which would be no surprise to any of you. Representativeness, specifically around non-response bias, and also OSEP implementation. And I just want to remind my Part C friends that there's an additional requirement for your submission next year in terms of including race ethnicity as one of the demographic categories you analyze for representativeness moving forward. For Part B, they had to do that this year, and next year it will be your turn to include that in the analysis moving forward. And that's it. I think next slide. I think the next slide says questions. So we finished early. I know some of you Part B folks might be with IDC still today. I think the data managers were meeting with them today. And I knew that this was a conflict. So if any of you were able to hop on, glad that we finished up the main portion of content early, but happy to take any questions if you have any. So I have a question about, I'll just say it out loud versus writing anything in the chat. And it is about what I just said. About for part C, the race ethnicity, demographic category for the analysis. So if you look at your current measurement table, this language would appear in C4. And in the instructions, it says that beginning with the FFY 2022 SPP APR due February 1 of next year, when reporting the extent to which the demographics of the infants or toddlers for whom families responded are representative of the demographics of infants and toddlers enrolled in the state's Part C program, states must include race ethnicity in their analysis. In the past, previous measurement table, previous information collection, language in the instructions had talked about, demographic categories that states should include. And with the new measurement table, that moved to must. And that was implemented for Part B a year earlier. So this year was the first year that Part B had to include race ethnicity in that analysis. And for Part C, that starts next year. The must part of it. Some Part C programs already include it in their analysis, but the must aspect starts next year. I have a question from data managers in Charlotte, so shout out to them. I have a question about the character limit in the SPP APR tool being increased. So no, we've not discussed the character limit being increased, and I'm not sure, I'm happy that Angela's on. I'm not sure that it can be increased, but what can happen to my friends in Charlotte is if there are places where you feel that you need additional narrative boxes to tell your story, let me know and we can have some discussions if we have to include more of those so you have more space to provide information. But a character limit increase is not on deck, but I also don't know the limitations of it, right? If it's tied to the system itself, if it's a security issue, et cetera. But my AEM friends are on and we can always touch base on it later. But if there's specific areas where you think you need more space to write, you can also let me know what those are.
And Christine, this is Angela, just to jump in. You are correct. There is a limitation around the maximum character limit for each narrative box, but yeah, happy to note if we need to add some additional boxes in any given indicator.
You guys who've known me for a long time know I have horrible wait times. And silence is like taxes my brain.
That looks like it might be it, Christine.
It looks like it might be it. Greg, thanks for saying. Greg knows I was feeling uncomfortable. I'm starting to sweat. I'm like, it's quiet. Yes. So I'll turn it back over to Greg. Know how much we appreciate all of your hard work and always making time out of your busy schedule to chat with us each month and twice a month in some instances. But Greg, you can take us home here with this poor air quality in DC.
So thanks, Angela and Sharon and Christine for leading us through this call. And a shout out to all our data manager friends who were still down in Charlotte. We got to spend a little time with them yesterday. Christine and I were down there along with our RTP colleague, Rochelle Davis. So that wraps it up for today. Our next TA call will be in 2 weeks on June 22nd. We'll be sending information out about that shortly. So everyone have a great rest of your afternoon.